Translator's note. Islam, a comprehensive introduction, is an extensive study of the contents of Islam by Javed Ahmad Ghamidi. It is an effort which spans almost 2 decades of both creative and critical thinking. This attempt to expound the contents of Islam is not a new one. Preceding Ghamidi is an illustrious series of names who have ventured forth to present Islam the way they have understood it. All these efforts are commendable and merit deep deliberation. A serious student should perhaps conduct a comparative study to gauge the approaches followed by each. The author is a prominent pupil of Amin Ahsan Islahi, a profound exegete and distinguished student of the prodigious Quranic scholar Hamiduddin Farahi. Ghamidi draws heavily on the approach and research of his 2 eminent predecessors. However, he has not only developed and lent precision to their approach and views, he has also made some original contributions in this regard. The entire effort is a fresh interpretation of Islam from its original sources on the basis of the principles delineated in the first preamble. The reason that it has been undertaken is that the interpretation of sacred texts has always remained a human endeavor and thus can never remain fault-free. It is as a result of this principle that the author has continued to evaluate and re-evaluate even his own findings. He is of the opinion that no view or interpretation is acceptable if it cannot stand up to criticism. It should not have any value merely because a certain great scholar or authority presented it. Even the greatest of scholars are not immune from error. Therefore, it is arguments and reasoning based only on the original sources of Islam that should be the basis for accepting or rejecting a point of view. Thus, just as the author has differed with authorities of the past, he has also differed from his 2 predecessors, whose approach and research are foundational to his work. Some distinctive features of the author's approach evident from this book are summarized below. 1. The Quran is regarded as the mizan or the scale, and the furqan or the distinguisher between right and wrong, a status which it itself claims. It is the scale on which everything related to religion must be weighed and the decisive word in every matter of religion. Everything in religion must stand in subservience to its verdicts. It is as a result of this supreme status of the Quran that the author has made the following inferences. A. There is only one reading of the Quran called the Al-Qiraatul Amma, or the general reading. It is only this reading which has been transmitted through Tawatur and can thus be called Quran. All other readings cannot be regarded as the Quran, and none of them stands up to the criterion of Tawatur. B. The Muhkam and Mutashabih verses of the Quran are distinct and easily discernible. The latter are verses that mention things which are beyond the grasp of human knowledge and observation or belong to matters of the hereafter. Such things are mentioned in the form of comparison or tashbih to things which we are aware of in our own language and through our own experience. The denotation of these verses is clear. However, human intellect is unable to understand the reality to which they refer. C. The Quran is a univocal book that conveys its meanings with absolute clarity, and there is no ambiguity about them. The intentionality of its text is certain and unmistakable. Its words convey what they stand for with full certainty. Differences in its interpretation have arisen not because there is any defect in its language or style. They have arisen because human beings at times falter in their understanding, which may be due to a lack of knowledge or to a lack of deliberation, or both. D. The Hadith is a historical record of prophetic teachings. It cannot change or modify the Quran in any way. Its scope is confined to explaining and elucidating religion, or in delineating the exemplar of the Prophet ﷺ. The Quran is not dependent on the Hadith for its explanation. On the contrary, the Hadith need to be interpreted in the light of the Quran. 2. The Sunnah is treated as an independent source of religion. It is distinct from Hadith, since at times the Hadith also contains a record of the Sunnah. People have erroneously equated the two. The Sunnah refers to that tradition of Prophet Abraham's religion which the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ instituted among his followers as religion after reviving and reforming it and after making certain additions to it. The Sunnah was transmitted to the Ummah by its perpetual adherents and thereby carrying the same stamp of authority as the Quran. 3. The Sharia portion of the book has been entirely cleansed from fiqh. It is based purely on the author's understanding of the divine law. Areas of fiqh like the application of Sharia to specific circumstances or judgments in which the Sharia is silent and ijtihad is needed are not touched upon. This is because all these areas belong to human intellect and are prone to change with change in circumstances and to variation because of a variance in intellect. 4. The Sunnatullah, or the dealings and practices of God, have been separated from the Sharia. These dealings and practices emanate from God Himself and as such must not be undertaken by human beings in any way. In this regard, the most important of these divine practices, which is the worldly punishment of the direct and immediate adversaries of the messengers of God who deliberately deny the truth, is distinctly reflected in the contents of the book. Its specific nature is highlighted so that it is not confused as a directive of the Sharia. 5. The scheme of the book is based on the categorization of the Quran regarding the contents of religion. According to the author, the Quran itself divides the contents of Islam into two distinct categories, Al-Hikmah and Al-Kitab. While the former refers to topics related to the philosophy of religion, the latter to those that relate to divine law or Sharia. He has further classified these two categories into subcategories. Al-Hikmah comprises two subcategories, faith and ethics, and Al-Kitab comprises 10 subcategories: the Sharia of worship rituals, the social Sharia, the political Sharia, the economic Sharia, the Sharia of preaching, the Sharia of jihad, the penal Sharia, the dietary Sharia, Islamic customs and etiquette, and oaths and their atonements. Consequently, part 1 of this book consists of topics related to Al-Hikmah, and part 2 consists of topics related to Al-Kitab. Two preambles to these parts, called Fundamental Principles and The Religion of Islam, introduce the reader to the hermeneutics which have led the author to his interpretation and to the overall framework of Islam, respectively. 6. The overall interpretive approach can be termed as text-based. It is primarily the text of the Quran which determines the purport of what constitutes Islam. Each section of a chapter of this book begins with a verse or verses of the Quran, which, according to the author, is the primary and foundational verse or verses of the topic dealt with in that section. Quranic verses cited subsequently in that section are of secondary nature to that topic. Needless to say that discovering the basic verse of a section helps the reader in grasping the primary Quranic guidance on that topic in a precise manner. Here I would like to express my deep gratitude to my friends and colleagues Asif Iftikhar, Tariq Mahmood Hashmi, and Jahangir Hanif for giving many useful suggestions to improve the language and standard of the translation. I am also greatly indebted to Iftikhar Tabassum for painstakingly tallying the translation with the original and giving valuable suggestions. I am also thankful to my colleague Izhar Ahmad for his hard work on the citations and references of this translation. I am no less indebted to Azim Ayub for formatting the manuscript time and again, and to Muazzam Safdar for supervising the printing process. May the Almighty reward all of them for their efforts. I must also express my gratitude to my mother, wife, and son, who have greatly supported me all along in this task. As a student of the author, I count myself very lucky to be able to discuss directly with the author himself many expressions, sentences, and concepts which needed clarification and explanation. All footnote and bibliographic entries, as well as text citation standards, are in accordance with the 14th edition of the Chicago Manual of Style. The only exception is that of enumeration, in which I have made slight innovations. Author's Foreword. The only religion acceptable to God is Islam. I have presented in this book my understanding of this religion. It is the result of my deliberations and musings spanning almost a quarter of a century. What appears sound in this book should be regarded as a favor from the Almighty and the outcome of what I have learnt from my illustrious mentor, Imam Amin Ahsan Islahi. What appears unsound should be attributed to my oversight.